If we're in war and it feels imminent, they certainly have a reaction. But here was an opportunity to see the president in the leadership role without having to deal with Congress necessarily, exactly. Like when he gets to control all the toys and all the buttons. Right. And I think there's a lot to be learned about him. And again, I think they're trying in the context of the campaign to teach people a little bit of something about, like, behind the scenes. This is how this man makes decisions. This is why you want to stay the course, if you will, with this president.
Yeah, I mean, and literally behind the scenes, like NBC News this week had this sort of groundbreaking interview, an opportunity to see inside the Situation Room. We heard during the GOP primaries, we heard this language that President Obama is an appeaser, and yet on December 8th of 2011, so at the end of last year, President Obama directly responded to that, and let's take a listen to that.
Our goal is not to build a country in America's image or to eradicate every vestige of the Taliban. These objectives would require many more years, many more dollars, and most importantly, many more American lives. Our goal is to destroy al-Qaeda, and we are on a path to do exactly that. Afghans want to assert their sovereignty and build a lasting peace. That requires a clear timeline to wind down the war.
So that actually wasn't the sound I was thinking of. I was thinking of the moment when the president said, just ask Osama bin Laden if I'm an appeaser, right? But that sound that we just heard, I think, is also useful to understanding exactly kind of the president as a leader. What difference are those kinds of statements going to make come election time?
Well, first, when you say foreign policy doesn't necessarily help, true, but being strong leader perceived on foreign policy does matter. And when you win strong leader, you're well on your way to re-winning the presidency. In 2000, that's the ground that George W. Bush commanded against Al Gore. And it was on that difference that part of the election swung. So what you're seeing here is, how do you rebut appeaser? You show strong leader. Yeah. And what the last week has been about is strong leader. There, Afghanistan, strong leader. Remember, Osama bin Laden, strong leader. Inside the Situation Room, look at this tough set of decisions. This week was all about creating the tacit rebuttal to all those alternative characterizations. It's about foreign policy. Ostensibly, it's actually established strong leader.
And that's also, I think, particularly important when you're talking about an incumbent running for re-election, right? Because, again, the argument is stay the course. That was the argument with George Bush when he was re-elected. And, you know, the polls after the fact showed that even people who weren't sure if they really liked him or agreed with him thought, you know what, I'm not ready to switch horses midstream here. He's good enough. And again, I think, obviously, this president is better than good enough, but I think it goes to your point.
Well, and they kind of just like the idea of not backing down. I mean, it really is the challenge, right, that a president faces in domestic politics, right? The fact is there are 500 some odd additional people who have to be convinced, right? There's 100 senators, 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives. All of those folks are part of that constituency. It's a very different story when, for example, it's the president making a call about Navy SEALs and the death of Osama bin Laden.
That's, sorry. I was going to say, the thing I also don't like, though, about this appeaser argument is, look at what happened with the deal we had to cut in Iraq before getting out. Because our president wasn't willing to sacrifice a degree of security for our troops, he said, you know, we're not going to sign that agreement. We're just going to pull out. That's not the mark of an appeaser to me.
Well, yeah, it also makes it, this whole positioning for the Obama administration on foreign policy, including a very strong Secretary of State, makes it very hard for the Republicans to launch their traditional line of argument, Democrat, weak on defense. And as you lay up these visual images, as you have a trial, as you remind with the Biden slogan, Detroit is alive, Osama bin Laden is dead, what you're essentially saying is translate this strong leader foreign affairs into a domestic policy perception of this person. And now there's no room there to run from the right against him on defense, but also no room to say soft on anything because it's tough on economy.
Right, he's doing this sort of muscular presidency, but I want to ask in part because it does feel like a big shift from particularly 2008 primaries, where part of how he positions himself as a distinct candidate over and against Hillary Clinton is, look, I thought the war in Iraq was a stupid war, right? I would not have voted for it. In fact, I wasn't yet in Congress to vote for it, but at that time I stood against it. And I will close Guantanamo Bay early on. So there's a portion on the left that is probably not responding to the hawkishness, that in fact probably feels a great deal of angst about it. What's going to happen with those voters? Are they going to hold President Obama accountable for being too hawkish, too successful?
Isn't part of the point of being a strong leader in the context? I mean, now he's been in the job for 3 years, and I think part of the argument that they're trying to make is that because of these 500 other people, a good portion of whom from day one made it their agenda to make sure there was not a second term, that, you know, when he is in charge, when he knows his agenda, he wants to get these things done. And some of the things, like he said, that have not happened the way we wanted, we've gotten some progress, not everything we wanted. He's not the only player in this mix. And so I think the argument they're trying to make is he's a strong leader. He's going to keep pushing to get these things done. But he's got to contend with these other forces.
With the obstructionist force. I mean, that's certainly part of the Guantanamo answer, right? Part of the answer is I can't just close it unilaterally, right? We have to have Congress on board.
But the Republican framing is very clear. It's really likable person. But aren't you disappointed that he wasn't really up to the job? And again, the question is, can you see the strong leader translate back from foreign affairs into economic activity in the presence of iffy job growth? There is growth there, it's better, but he's in the difficult position of arguing it's better than it would have been had you elected the alternative, a virtually impossible argument to sell because you can't make it concrete.
When we come back, I want to dig in a little bit more on this question of what the Afghanistan policy is, what it looks like, because part of the reason that it feels like waltzing before a blind audience is because we have so little information about how to actually understand and think about issues like drone attacks and the Chinese humanitarian crisis and all of that. So stay right there. We're going to continue to waltz before our blind audience. And later this hour, what issue could be a driving wedge within the Democratic Party base? We'll talk about that.